I knew something was rotting beneath the surface the moment I got that company-wide friendly reminder from HR. Subject line: action required. NDA and contractor policy. Update smiling face with smiling eyes. There's something especially sinister about a smiley face attached to what's essentially a legal noose. I opened the PDF and immediately felt the familiar itch behind my eyes, that itch I get when I smell bullshit disguised as corporate policy. This wasn't just routine housekeeping. This was a cleanup job of the kind you do before a storm. But let me back up. By that point, I'd been working at Virelia Systems for 8 years. Senior backend engineer, title barely updated since Obama was in office, despite leading half the infrastructure build solo. You know the type: quiet, competent, a ghost in the meeting room until someone breaks the production pipeline. Then suddenly everyone's Slack explodes with that "Dana, please help." My badge still beeped green. My PTO bank was always maxed out. And if someone asked who kept the dev environment stable, they'd blink, tilt their heads and go, "Oh right, Dana." I wasn't flashy, but I was the reason the place still ran. And if you're one of the 90% who listen to these stories without subscribing, well, let's just say the team behind this channel doesn't run on corporate favors or expired coffee pods. Drop a like, hit that sub, it keeps us caffeinated and petty. Now, where was I? Ah yes, HR. This new NDA smelled off. It had boilerplate language, sure, but also a suspicious section on retroactive confidentiality, and get this, a clause warning about non-compete expectations for independent contributors. Independent contributors. Except I wasn't one. None of us were. We were full-time engineers. But for about a year now, things had gotten weird. Titles were being rewritten on the internal org chart. Folks were told to invoice their hours instead of logging them. A buddy in front end even joked, "Guess we're all freelancers now. Does that mean I can expense my couch?" We laughed. Kind of. I raised it internally, first to my direct manager, Brandon, who blinked twice like I was speaking Esperanto and mumbled something about exec-level strategy. Then to HR, who assured me the documents were standard compliance hygiene. When I pushed, the response was classic. "Dana, maybe you're overthinking this. Let's focus on your deliverables." Overthinking, the corporate kiss of death. It's what they say when you're right, but it's inconvenient. So I did what I always did. I saved everything. Emails, PDFs, timestamped messages, screenshots. I opened a private Google Drive folder, named it just in case, and kept working. Kept fixing their messes. Kept writing clean code while the back end of the entire company's payroll ethics looked like a haunted amusement park ride. The final straw wasn't a blow-up or a dramatic meeting. It was subtle. Brandon pinged me on Teams, no punctuation, no greeting, and wrote, "Just FYI, payroll asked if you'd be open to switching to 1099 next cycle." That's it. That's what cracked it open. I stared at the message like it was a cursed object. I'd been cleaning up after junior devs who called "get the button thing" and mentoring interns who spelled function with a K. I'd been running security patch cycles on my weekends and rewriting data handling modules after hours because no one else could tell a race condition from a literal horse race. And they wanted to turn me into a contractor? No benefits, no protections, no overtime, no severance, no equity. Just a tidy way to cut their own tax liabilities by pretending the entire engineering department was some outsourced gang of gig workers. I didn't respond. Not to Brandon, not to HR. Not even when they sent the opt-in paperwork 2 days later with a cheery subject line, "Exciting new flexibility for team members." That night, I poured a glass of boxed Merlot and opened my just-in-case folder. Then I created a subfolder titled Payroll Evasion, because if they wanted flexible, I could flex. Just not the way they expected. They called it a realignment. Like my job was a crooked painting on their pristine corporate wall. I got the meeting invite at 4:12 p.m. on a Thursday. Subject line: Quick sync W/people ops smiling face with smiling eyes. There's that damn smiley again. Red flag number 1. Red flag number 2, it was scheduled for 4:15. 3 minutes notice. That's not a sync. That's a surgical hit. Zoom room open to HR Director Cheryl. I swear I wasn't a hall monitor Dansby, and some guy from legal I'd never seen before who introduced himself as support on today's call. His smile looked carved from drywall. My manager, Brandon, was mysteriously absent. Coward. "Hi Dana," Cheryl chirped. "Thanks for hopping on. I'll be brief because I know your time is valuable." That's when I knew it was over. They only mention how valuable your time is when they're about to rob you of it. She launched into the script like she was ordering a sad sandwich at Panera. Due to ongoing restructuring and a need to streamline budget allocations across key verticals, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate your role, effective immediately. I didn't blink, didn't flinch. I just counted the buzzwords: restructuring, streamline, eliminate. 12 years of my life reduced to jargon and a virtual thumbs-up emoji in the corner of her little Zoom box. I muted my mic, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning like a lazy executioner. Cheryl droned on about Cobra and final pay and next steps while Drywall Boy clicked something on DocuSign. But I was already gone. Not emotionally, strategically. The folder, the evidence, the classification logs, Slack messages from managers telling engineers to keep timesheets vague. I hadn't built that archive for fun. I built it because I knew this moment would come. I just didn't expect it to be delivered with a Canvas-lap PowerPoint and a LinkedIn recruiter smile. After about 10 minutes of HR kabuki theater, Cheryl ended the call with, "We're doing you a favor by not contesting unemployment, Dana. Most companies wouldn't be so generous." I stared at my screen long after the Zoom call ended. The silence in my apartment felt heavier than usual. The only sound was the ice melting in the Diet Coke I forgot to drink. Then my inbox pinged. Subject, termination confirmation and unemployment info from Cheryl Dansby, Director of People Ops Body. Dana, as discussed, your employment with Virelia Systems is terminated effective today due to restructuring. Attached is your termination letter. You are eligible to apply for unemployment benefits. As a gesture of goodwill, the company will not be contesting your claim. All the best, Cheryl's smiling face with smiling eyes, the smiley. Again, I didn't rage, didn't sob, no grand speeches. Just that eerie clinical stillness that creeps in when you know the final move isn't loud, it's precise. I clicked reply all, typed 6 words. Thank you for this favor. Then I added a recipient to the CC line. Dolgov at Postmaster Dolgov, the Department of Labor's intake. Attached, a zip file labeled contractor classification evidence. Inside, every piece of proof I'd been sitting on. Emails from finance, memos from legal, internal Slack threads, an Excel sheet with all 74 engineers I knew were misclassified, including myself, including the guy legal just used as support on today's call. I hovered over send for exactly 3 seconds, then clicked. I didn't feel victorious, not yet, but I did feel clean, like finally setting a bone that had been broken for years. Painful, sure, but finally right. I sat in the glow of my monitor like it was a campfire and I was about to burn down the village. Outside, the sky was rust orange, like God himself had hit a Snapchat filter called arson. But inside my apartment, it was just me, a lukewarm can of La Croix, a laptop that suddenly felt more powerful than any courtroom. I didn't cry. That would have made sense, but no tears came, no yelling. Just this hollow, floating calm, like the silence after a hard drive dies and takes 10 years of photos with it. The part of me that had clung to hope, to dignity, to the notion that good work protected good workers, that part had already been put out back with the office ficus and the half-used post-it rolls. They didn't just fire me. They freed me. I opened the folder titled Payroll Evasion. My cursor hovered over it like it was radioactive. Then I double-clicked. Inside, a mosaic of corporate rot. Screenshots of Slack conversations where managers coach people to log less than 30 HRS/week for compliance optics. Job listings where full-time roles were described as independent contributor roles with full integration into dev cycle. Expense reports flagged with do not reimburse, violates contractor status. PDF versions of old onboarding decks that stated, in big blue font, you'll be a part of the Virelia family. Permanent, W-2, full benefits. Dated, timestamped, and directly contradicted by newer memos urging engineers to invoice like freelancers and avoid saying team member in client emails. I dragged in a new document, aimed at formal misclassification report Virelia Systems. Then I started writing. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just facts, cold and stacked like bricks. Each section had headers, job descriptions, VSIRS guidelines, internal communications, payroll practices, retaliation patterns. I included names, dates, attachments, even hyperlinks to the Department of Labor's own criteria. My tone was clinical, less whistleblower, more coroner. I listed all 73 engineers I knew had been quietly moved from W-2 to 1099 or had been onboarded under the lie of permanency. Some still had the company laptop. Some had never even been told they were contractors, just stopped receiving benefits without notice. They were told to check their classification in the portal, as if they'd misread their own livelihoods. I laid it all out, section by section. By 2:40 a.m., I had a 22-page report and an evidence folder with enough weight to knock out a mid-level compliance officer. But I didn't send it yet, not out of doubt, out of respect. Because once it left my inbox, there was no pulling it back, no just venting. This wasn't a diary, it was a detonation device. I leaned back, eyes dry, spine tight. The radiator in my apartment kicked on with a metallic groan, that stupid noise it makes when it's trying too hard. Just like me for the last 8 years. Working weekends, babysitting interns, covering for VPs who couldn't explain version control if their Tesla keys depended on it. The eerie calm didn't leave, it deepened, and that's how I knew I was ready, because I wasn't chasing revenge. I was cleaning the system, like I'd done 1,000 times before, quietly, without credit, without thanks. Only this time the system was Virelia, and I wasn't debugging code, I was preparing an autopsy. The first email was short, just a file attachment and a sentence, supporting documentation for open claim employee misclassification. Sent from a burner Proton mail I spun up in 10 minutes, the kind of email address you'd use to confess a murder or cancel Comcast. The DOL investigator's auto-reply came back 2 minutes later. Name, Cynthia Morales. Signature block all formal and forgettable. Thank you for your submission. Case 21 to 47,803 has been opened under Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division. There it was, a number, a timestamp, and a path. I didn't sign my name, didn't need to. The evidence would speak louder than any speech I could give. And besides, they'd made it abundantly clear my voice didn't matter, until now. Now, every Slack thread I saved, every PDF I archived, every contractor memo I'd screenshotted while waiting for Jenkins to deploy became a bullet in the chamber. I sent another file the next day, then another. I spaced them out, 1 or 2 documents per day, never more, like feeding breadcrumbs to a very patient wolf. Meanwhile, I went silent. I didn't answer texts, didn't like posts, didn't drop a congrats on anyone's new job update. If someone reached out saying, "Heard what happened, you okay?" let it sit unread. Not because I was mad, because I couldn't trust who was watching, but I did watch. LinkedIn became my surveillance station. My version of watching the house burn from the rearview mirror, that's how I saw it. A new job post for senior backend developer contract role, immediate start. Same language, same team, same responsibilities. But now with a fancy little disclaimer, independent contributor model, not eligible for employee benefits. That was me, that was my role, repackaged with a legal condom and pushed out into the wild like no one would notice. Except I did. And so did Cynthia eventually. Each job listing was another nail. Each reposted flexible work opportunity, a breadcrumb that led right back to a spreadsheet I had already sent. They weren't pivoting, they were doubling down. Then the Slack rumors started trickling in. My old intern, Maddie, bless her brave little heart, was the first to break the silence. She messaged me on Signal, not Slack, which told me she knew. "Did you hear about the compliance audit? They're making everyone fill out some dumb questionnaire about time tracking." A week later, another former colleague updated their status to open to work. No announcement, no goodbye, just gone. The engineers had started whispering and corporate was starting to sweat. I heard through the grapevine, okay, Reddit, that someone from finance accidentally emailed a company-wide reminder about offboarding 1,099s by end of quarter to mitigate classification risk. It was meant for department heads. It went to everyone, including a few still believed the lie full-timers who hadn't realized they were 1,099s until that moment. The Slack engineering channel, normally just Jira memes and snark about lunch options, had gone quiet. Then weird. Like corporate was pushing pre-written messages through management to look spontaneous. One post read, "Reminder, our flexible workforce model is a competitive advantage. Thanks for being agile, right?" They thought if they tossed enough buzzwords on the fire, the smoke wouldn't smell like fraud. But I wasn't done feeding the flames. Cynthia started replying directly now, asking for clarification, highlighting certain names. She was building her own map. I made sure she had every landmark she'd need. On Friday, I sent her a batch of onboarding documents with the metadata intact, PDFs created by HR but signed by managers. The files were dated months before any of us were told we'd been converted to contractors. The audit trail was clear. The misclassification wasn't an accident, it was a strategy. At 11:07 p.m., she replied, "Thank you, this is very helpful. We'll be in touch shortly." Shortly, I read that word a few times. Let it sit in my chest like a match waiting to be struck. They still didn't know it was me, and I wasn't ready to change that just yet, because the trap wasn't set. Not fully. Not until they tried to wriggle free, only to realize the chain around their ankle was welded shut. It started with a text that just said, "Do you have 5 minutes? I'm using my personal phone." It was Becca. She was one of the few people at Virelia who actually asked how I was doing during the long nights we debugged API failures or stayed late prepping for demo day disasters. We weren't best friends, but we'd eaten enough lukewarm falafel wraps together in the war room to earn each other's trust. We met in the parking lot of a Safeway at 9:30 p.m. She climbed into my car like we were planning a bank heist and looked around before speaking. "I have to whisper this or I'll combust," she said, half laughing. "Finance is a full-blown crime scene right now." I didn't interrupt, just nodded, let her go. They've got these spreadsheets open in some locked-down channel, trying to calculate what it would cost to reclassify people. Like, retroactively. HR's panicking because legal's making them draft apology memos that'll never see daylight. People are saying words like back pay and IRS thresholds like they're ordering lunch. Then she dropped the one that made my jaw tick. The CTO's been in every HR meeting this week. That man hadn't stepped foot in the HR wing in 6 years. He thought PTO was a brand of kombucha. If he was showing up now, it wasn't for employee morale. It was because the walls were cracking, and they didn't know which one would fall first. Becca sipped from a Gatorade like she was washing poison from her mouth. They know something's coming, they just don't know from where. I didn't confirm or deny. Just squeezed her arm and told her to stay invisible. When she got out, she looked at me like she knew I wasn't just sipping boxed Merlot and job hunting. I was lighting matches in the crawl space. 2 days later, the email from the DOL landed like a surgical strike. Subject, verification request case 21 to 47,803 from Cynthia Morales at Dolgov Body. Miss Jameson, we are currently reviewing your submitted materials. Please confirm the authenticity of the following 3 email threads, dated March 3, March 17, and April 9, respectively. Additionally, could you confirm that the attachments included were created during your employment with Virelia Systems? If possible, please respond by COB Thursday. Thank you for your cooperation. Cynthia Morales, Wage and Hour Division, U.S. Department of Labor. I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't a casual check-in. It was a legal checkpoint. I opened the referenced emails. Yep, all mine. March 3rd was the one where Brandon told me, keep it under 30 hours so we're safe from W-2 thresholds, lol. March 17th had Cheryl sending out a contractor onboarding doc and reminding managers, don't call them employees, even if they have a Virelia email. April 9th, that was the gem, an HR slide deck titled Benefits Cost Savings, Contractor Conversion Opportunity. I replied with one line, confirmed. All emails and documents authentic and created by me during full-time employment at Virelia Systems. Attached, original, EML files with headers. Our data intact, no edits. If they wanted a clean chain of custody, I'd give them one. I'd give them the kind of digital trail you couldn't scrub with bleach and prayer. After hitting send, I leaned back and exhaled through my nose. This wasn't some petty retaliation anymore. This wasn't even about me. They had tried to turn people into ghosts. Taxless, benefit-less, disposable ghosts. Just floating hands on keyboards they didn't have to pay for properly. And now, the ghosts were showing up in court documents. The best part? They still didn't know who was feeding the fire. Every time Becca messaged me another update, like the sudden hiring of a compliance consulting firm or the rumor that HR was being restructured, I just replied with the same emoji. Eyes, let them chase shadows. Let them host their damage control meetings with words like alignment and risk posture, while the Department of Labor quietly sharpened its knives. I wasn't hiding, I was waiting. And the moment they looked under the wrong rock, they were going to find the fuse already lit. It came on a Wednesday morning, wrapped in corporate fleece and spun sugar, the email from People Ops with the subject line, clarifying our compliance posture moving forward. I could practically hear Cheryl Dansby's voice through the screen, calm, insufferably neutral, the same tone she used when she once told an engineer his maternity leave was technically non-essential. The body of the email was full of the usual nothing: alignment with federal expectations, leveraging our flexible talent model, appreciation for your adaptability. But buried in bullet point 3 was the real payload. As part of this transition, we'll be updating classification statuses to better reflect our evolving workforce. Team members currently engaged under hybrid or independent arrangements may receive new freelance contracts. Please review and sign by Friday EOD to ensure continuity of access and payment. Let me translate, we're in deep shit. Sign this fake freelance contract to make our crimes look consensual. They were trying to backfill history. Rewrite payroll fiction with panicked ink. If this were a movie, would be the part where the villains start shredding documents while the cops pull into the parking lot. I didn't even have to dig for fallout anymore. It was floating in the wind. 3 hours later, I got a signal message from Mateo, a junior engineer I used to mentor back when he still used the word merge like it meant traffic. He'd been smart, hungry, and just naive enough to believe that hard work would equal stability. I used to help him debug his Jenkins pipelines. Now he was sending me snapshots of the apocalypse. You didn't get this from me, he wrote, but someone left this in the printer room. It was just sitting there like a ticking bomb. Attached was a memo, internal, marked confidential, titled Contractor Compliance Risk Matrix Red Flag Cases. Paragraph 2 sealed it, per legal review. The audit trigger was escalated following documentation received from a former employee. This individual's submissions included corroborating evidence across multiple departments, indicating systemic misclassification dating back at least 5 fiscal years. I stared at the screen. Let the words wash over me like a warm bath of schadenfreude. They still didn't know it was me. They were scanning the wrong floors, pulling the wrong badge records, probably interrogating the loudmouths and the HR critics. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't raised hell. I just raised a hand, pointed, and that had been enough. The memo also listed mitigation strategies, which included retrospective contractor agreements, narrow scope rewrites for job descriptions, and my favorite, internal comms to control narrative preemptively. Control the narrative, honey. You lost control when you sent that first smiley face termination email. I could picture it so clearly, execs in their little glass box conference rooms, eyes twitching, voices tight, asking each other who the mole was. Cheryl rifling through Slack logs, the GC yelling into muted Zoom calls, and Brandon, probably pretending not to exist, still using words like pivot while the ship split down the middle. Another ping came from Mateo, a photo, this time, of a whiteboard someone forgot to erase in the HR war room. If identity of former employee is uncovered, right arrow direct engagement. Offer settlement? I laughed out loud. They were trying to figure out if they could buy silence they didn't know was already roaring inside an official investigation, like putting a band-aid on a bullet hole in a submarine. I didn't need a microphone. The DOL had one now, and I wasn't bitter. Not really. What I felt was something colder, sharper, sardonic satisfaction, because I had spent years being the quiet one, the one who cleaned up code no one understood, the one who documented everything because someone had to. The one who was told you care too much and maybe just let it go. Well, I let it go. Right into the lap of a federal agency with subpoena power and a calendar full of open slots. And now, I just watched the contracts go unsigned. Watched LinkedIn updates shift from software engineer at Vialia to exploring new opportunities. Watched the company try to patch a dam with press releases and prayer. Still no one called me. Still no one knew. And still the trap stayed shut. It started with a blocked number and a voicemail that sounded like it was read off a cue card soaked in sweat. Hi Dana, this is Cheryl Dansby from People Ops. Just hoping we can chat, informally, to clear the air. No pressure, of course, off the record. Just clarifying context on some recent items you may have been involved with. She didn't say DOL, didn't say audit, didn't say oh God, we're bleeding out, but she didn't have to. I played the message twice, not because I needed to hear it again. I just liked the way her voice cracked at the end, right before she hung up. Like even her breath knew this was over. 3 minutes later, an email appeared in my inbox. Not from Cheryl this time. From a personal Gmail with a fake-sounding name, mcconnorsadvisory@gmail.com. The message was short and sanitized within an inch of its life. Miss Jameson, we'd welcome the opportunity for a confidential conversation to better understand any information you may have shared regarding your time with Vialia. This is strictly off the record and will not be used in any formal capacity. If you're open to a brief chat, we're happy to accommodate your schedule. Translation, we don't know how deep we're buried and we're hoping you'll dig us out before the feds do. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my desktop folder one last time. This one wasn't called payroll evasion or classification proof. This one was just titled Finish It. Inside, the stuff I'd saved for last. The big guns. The things I hadn't sent yet because I wanted to wait until the house was mid-collapse. The explosion would be blamed on the faulty wiring, not me. First, a full log of the payment processor dashboard for all independent contributors. Monthly disbursements, vendor IDs, and an internal note from finance labeled use ACH to avoid triggering employee thresholds. Second, onboarding documentation for contractors who were issued Vialia laptops, given company email addresses, and required to attend daily stand-ups with mandatory hours, despite having signed paperwork that described them as self-guided consultants. Third, an internal email chain with the subject line, "Don't trigger W2 rules PLS." No joke, that's what they named it. Cheryl had replied ACK with a smiley face, again with the damn smileys. I zipped the files, encrypted them, and uploaded them through the Department of Labor's secure portal. It took 10 minutes. I didn't even need to write a message this time. The evidence could sing for itself. Then I closed the laptop and went to make coffee. 4 hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Becca. No preamble, just a message. The GC just walked out of the building. Looked like he'd seen a ghost. Did you? I stared at the screen for a long moment. Smiled. Did I? Did I send the one thing that confirmed what they were still praying was just smoke and shadows? Did I hit them so clean, so quiet? I didn't even realize they were bleeding until the boardroom started spinning. I didn't respond, didn't type yes, didn't wink, didn't send a cryptic emoji, because silence at that point was louder than anything else I could say. They had spent months trying to figure out who was feeding the DOL, and now they had their answer. Not in a name, not in a voice, but in the shape of the hole left behind. They showed up in windbreakers, not dramatic. No flashbangs or SWAT vans, but still unmistakable. The kind of entrance that made the glass lobby suddenly feel a little colder. 3 agents from the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division, accompanied by 2 IT specialists from the Office of Inspector General. One carried a sealed envelope. Another wheeled in a cart with 3 external drives and a laptop that probably had more security clearance than half the executives combined. Security tried to act confused. HR tried to act calm. Legal didn't act at all. They just started sweating in unison like synchronized swimmers. Word spread in the building faster than a fire drill. Someone from facilities messaged Becca, "The feds are here." Cheryl looks like she aged 20 years in 5 minutes. They were taken to a glass conference room on the 3rd floor. Curtains drawn. Access logs requested. Admin permissions pulled. Devices tagged. 10:30 a.m. 3 executives had already left the building citing pre-scheduled off-site meetings. One of them, Brandon, of course, didn't even close his laptop. Just unplugged it mid-email and bailed like someone yelled compliance and lit a match. Cheryl tried to downplay it naturally. A company-wide Slack post at 11:07 a.m. read, "Team, you may see some external auditors in the building today. As part of our commitment to compliance excellence, we're participating in a routine labor classification review. There's nothing to be concerned about, business as usual." Smiling face with smiling eyes, that damn emoji again. Corporate hospice care at its finest, but the lie didn't last long. At 1:13 p.m., someone leaked the real memo. Screenshot, confidential header. Typed in bold red at the top, investigation scope, misclassification of labor 2016 to present. Contractor conversion practices, tax evasion risk index, high. Becca forwarded it to me with a single word, "Yikes, that was generous." The The scope went back 7 years, which meant every VP who'd bragged about lean scaling and creative HR modeling was now on a government radar. Every freelance contract signed under duress. Every benefits form mysteriously missing from onboarding packets. Every calendar invite with the subject line compliance sync. At home, I sat curled up on the couch, a wool blanket over my knees, watching the storm through a laptop screen. No Twitter thread, no Reddit leak. This wasn't for public humiliation. This was justice, bureaucratic, deliberate, and cold. Then the email came from Cynthia. Subject, case update 21 to 47,803 body. Miss Jameson, thank you again for your cooperation and the materials you provided. Based on your documentation, we have officially opened a formal case that includes all 74 engineers identified during our review. Our team will be reaching out to relevant parties for interviews and further verification. If you have any additional context or files, you may continue to submit them via the secure portal. No signature flourish, no gold star, just the acknowledgement that the thing was real now. Moving, gaining mass. I sat back and stared at the line, all 74 engineers identified, 74 people who'd been quietly converted into tax loopholes, 74 lives packaged as cost savings. I wondered how many of them still hadn't realized they'd been misclassified. How many had paid out of pocket for healthcare? How many had lost out on overtime, on family leave, on basic protections? It wasn't about revenge anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about the truth finally having teeth. Violia had danced on the edge of legality for too long, drunk on buzzwords and unchecked ego. They thought they could rewrite reality with enough pivot decks and smiley-faced memos. But the federal government doesn't pivot. It investigates, and now they were inside the building, and I was home, watching it all unfold, quiet, unapologetic, and ready. The headline hit like a crowbar to the kneecaps of their brand. Violia Systems under federal probe for 7-year labor scheme, dozens of engineers misclassified as contractors. Subheadline, sources confirm company faces millions in back taxes and penalties. Whistleblower remains anonymous. By the time I saw it, the story had already spread to 3 different tech blogs, a labor rights forum, and the Reddit thread where all the quietly exploited software people go to scream into the void. Commenters were dissecting the leaked memo like it was a murder confession. Someone even linked a public IRS contractor compliance checklist and wrote, "They violated almost every bullet. It's almost impressive." I poured myself a glass of red, real stuff this time, not boxed, and sat back on the couch. The sun outside was setting just slow enough to make it feel like time was folding over itself. My laptop hummed. The email alert pinged, soft and indifferent. Subject, new opening full-time W-2 role, benefits plus equity from recruiter, confidential tech startup. I didn't open it. Not right away. Instead, I flipped over to the article again. A quote from one of the early engineers, someone I barely knew but remembered for always volunteering to fix other people's code at 2 a.m. Read, "We didn't even know we were being misclassified. It took someone brave to say what we were all too scared to admit." Brave? Not exactly. More like tired, methodical, just done. Another article quoted a leaked internal update from the board. Effective immediately, the CEO and head of HR have stepped down to allow the company to restructure its leadership in the wake of the investigation. Translation, the board pushed them out so fast their chairs were still spinning. Brandon had updated his LinkedIn with former in the title. Cheryl had deleted hers entirely. No apology, no acknowledgement, just vapor. Investors began pulling funding the next day. Their quarterly burn rate was suddenly very public, and nobody wants to bet on a tech company that might owe 7 figures in back taxes. One VC wrote a thread on ethical due diligence and got roasted in the comments for having backed Violia in the first place. The house was still burning, but I was already gone. Not with a bang, not with a press tour, just with a full inbox, secure job lead, and the knowledge that every person who'd been used and misled was about to be counted on paper by law in dollars and damages. I picked up my glass, took a sip. The wine tasted like slate and smoke, honest and bitter. Then I clicked open the recruiter's email. "We're hiring senior engineers for a new platform. Full W-2, benefits, protected classification. Zero tolerance for misclassification. We're building this right. Below that, we'd be honored to have someone like you." I didn't smile, didn't gloat. Just let the cursor hover over reply, because this was the real favor. They let me walk out with everything. They thought they'd silenced me with a smiley face and a severance dodge. But I let them walk into the fire themselves. I just turned on the lights and held the door. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.